Welcome to MEMO's conversation with human rights activist Arslan Hidayat. I am Anjuman Rahman, a writer at Middle East Monitor. Thank you for joining us. Today we'll be discussing about the lack of support and international solidarity with the Uyghur Muslims in China, particularly from some of the Muslim states which has been enabling the Uyghur genocide, which we see happening right in front of our eyes due to their silence. We've seen clips of huge masses of Uyghur Muslims rounded up, blindfolded, and taken to camps where they undergo indoctrination programs. We see it, yet we don't register it. As many as 3 million Muslims, Uyghur Muslims, including indigenous people, are taken to these camps based in East Turkestan, also known as the Xinjiang province. Former detainees have described experiences of torture, interrogation, and daily regimen of Communist Party indoctrination, resulting to many committing suicide. Today we have Arslan Hidayat here. He's a Uyghur activist and campaigner. He has brought the attention of many to the Uyghur Muslims before even the mainstream media have adopted. And he remains in connection with members of community there and has become a source of information for many. So welcome, Arslan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out to talk to us. Can you start off by maybe giving us some background information regarding the Uyghur Muslims in China and the current realities on the ground?
Well, let's first start off who the Uyghur people are. The Uyghur people are a Turkic people. They've been in what we geographically known as Turkestan for thousands of years. And what, as you've mentioned, East Turkestan, which is geographically east of that. And predominantly a Muslim population. They've been at pretty much war with the Chinese through its various empires for the past 260 years. But if we go recently in the past 70 years since the Chinese communist regime came to power and conquered or invaded what we know now as Chinese occupied East Turkestan. They renamed it as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, which literally means new land or new frontier. And the name itself literally tells the world that this land actually does not belong to China. So with that ideology, China has been doing its very best, not just the past 3 or 4 years with the concentration camps, but the past 71 almost 72 years of oppression, whether it be during the Cultural Revolution or with trying to ban our language, changing the language from, say, the Arabic script to the Latin script, then from the Latin script back to the Arabic script, having generations of illiterate people. When they talk about, uplifting the Uyghurs, it's quite the opposite. Economically, they've always tried to keep the Uyghurs poor, uneducated, ignorant, and we've seen various massacres that happened every 5 or 10 years, with thousands die, thousands disappear each time these massacres happen. Some of the most, say, infamous massacres start in 1990, where the Uyghurs were, trying to, disregard or not follow the one-child policy, or for the Uyghurs at the time, 2-child policies. And as you know, with Turkic people and Arab people, we have many children, 4, 5, 6 children at least, and they were trying to round that down to 2. So there were uprisings and Muslims, Uyghurs got culled. And then 10 years later, or 7, 8 years later, another massacre in Gulja, then followed by another massacre in Urumqi. And now we see the concentration camps, which are reminiscent of what happened during the Jewish Holocaust. And in these camps, former detainees have told us that people are dying in these camps. One former detainee told us that while she was there for 3 months, that 9 people had died in front of her. And we have estimates of anywhere between 500 to 1,000 camps. And so you can imagine from one cell, 9 people dying in a 3-month period, God knows how many hundreds of thousands have people already have died. And we're looking at the most conservative estimates, anywhere between 1 to 2 million, and some have recorded as 5 or 6 million people in these camps. People are being tortured, indoctrinated. Women as well as men are being gang raped. And we also have stories of halal organ harvesting, which is where there's obviously no such thing as halal organ harvesting, but this is where the rich of the Middle East, and as you mentioned, these Muslim majority countries, the rich of the Middle East go into China, get their organs, but they opt for organs from Muslim people because, for some reason they are deterred by people who eat pork and alcohol and they don't want that in their body. So it's very crazy and disgusting how this logic comes to be. And yeah, this is just some of what's been happening in Chinese occupied East Turkestan.
And of course, this has been going on for many years. We've only been recently finding out the last, say, 6 to 7 years. Now it's becoming more into the media. But why do you think that Muslim states haven't been so outspoken about this issue? And obviously, recently we've also found that for decades, Turkey was a place of refuge for some of the Uyghur Muslims, and now it seems like they've taken a complete U-turn and instead are becoming an ally to this crime and sending back Uyghurs to China to get sent to these concentration camps. So, what's your take on this?
Or just before the actual, say, the crackdown and opening of the camps, which was about the beginning of 2017, China had already established their relationship with the Middle East, especially in the Gulf region, anywhere between 2011 and 2014, making trade deals, the One Belt, One Road initiative, which goes through many of these Gulf countries. So we're talking about billions, if not trillions of dollars of infrastructure and money at play. And we also have to look at those Muslim countries themselves. How do they treat their own minorities? And recently we've seen how certain Gulf countries treat the Palestinians, and with the recent deals that they've done with Israel. So in their own backyard, they've already got human rights issues. But, unfortunately, we'd like to think that Muslim countries or Muslims overall, the famous hadith from Prophet ﷺ saying that if one part of the ummah is hurting, the ummah is like a body. And if one part of the body is hurting, that means the whole body should be hurting. And clearly we are not following this hadith. And I urge Muslim leaders to go back to Islam, to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And Turkey, as you mentioned recently, Turkey's in the same boat. They've literally cut their ties with the US when it comes to trade. They've had to latch on to countries like China and Russia. And so Turkey, in a way, has become a client state. We do have one report of a woman by the name of Zinnet Gül Tursun and her 2 children that were indirectly deported to China through Tajikistan. And we estimate that there are many more others that have been deported in this manner. And hopefully the truth comes to light. And we also urge Turkey to be on the right side of history.
Okay. And while these Muslim majority states remain, are turning a blind eye, instead, the West, including the US, are being more outspoken, classing it as a genocide and, imposing sanctions on Chinese officials. But this is so far because they've had trade disagreements. Do you feel like, seen as all these countries are becoming solely economically motivated, once the US and China are back on good terms, they'll also just, chuck the Uyghurs away again? Is there a fear of that? What do you predict?
I mean, obviously, without a doubt, all these countries are trying to get their 5, 10%, 15% more in trade deals. But regardless, if it wasn't for the United States, we would have more bloodshed. The numbers would rise. And as you mentioned, I am afraid that, say, the United States, after November, it'll be interesting to see, or after this COVID pandemic is over, it'll be interesting to see how the world reacts, because the amount of support that the Uyghurs have gotten post-COVID is not the same as pre-COVID. And as you mentioned before, the lack of support from Muslim majority countries, China uses this as a propaganda tool, saying, well, if there really was propaganda, if there really was oppression against the Uyghurs, if we really were doing this, then how come these Muslim majority countries support these concentration camps? And it's very disgusting to see, like, the current leader of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, even supporting China's policies of oppression against the Uyghurs. And to correct you, no Western leader has actually named or called what's happening to the Uyghurs as a genocide. They've said things like crimes against humanity. I believe Joe Biden recently, about a week ago, 10 days ago, named it or labeled it as a genocide. And that's what it exactly is. But we've gone beyond labels. And what I fear is, even if Western leaders do label it as a genocide, then what? Are they really going to take actual action against China? So time will tell. We'll see what happens.
And like you brought up the Palestinians, many have compared the situation to the Palestinians and the Rohingyans, because it's the same reactions from these Muslim leaders, they turn a blind eye, or they're making the most minimal effort. But would you say they're in the same spectrum, as in, when you compare the coverage, what each get, what differences do you see?
Definitely, we don't get as much coverage as the Palestinians or the Rohingya. I would say there's a big difference between what's happening to the Rohingya and the Uyghurs than to the Palestinians. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieve the oppression of any Muslims or any Muslims around the world. But in Palestine, you got to remember that you can still have a beard, you can still wear hijab, you can still, scream and protest against the IDF. You can still say Allahu Akbar, you can still pray, you can still have babies. You are not forced to marry Israelis. Your organs are not harvested. Yes, there is oppression in Palestine, don't get me wrong, but no way is it the same level. And I've said many times that if what was happening to the Palestinians was happening to the Uyghurs, a lot of Uyghurs will say, Alhamdulillah, we will be blessed. We will call it a holiday, literally. And I've said this to many Palestinians that know of the situation with the Uyghurs, and they totally agree with me. So, yes, the Palestinian situation, Palestinians deserve a state, and may Allah relieve their situation. But definitely, we don't get as much attention as the Palestinians or the Rohingyans.
And I see you online, you advocate to boycott, stuff that are made in China, and you call for various different approaches. Um, what's your advice on what we as individuals can do to bring this issue more to the forefront and more
I
into?
mean, yeah, so definitely, especially if you're a student at university, you can talk to, especially if you're studying political science or things like this, you could talk to your professor about, writing a dissertation, a paper, and China really hate this, especially in the West. There is one fellow by the name of Drew Pavlo, a fellow Australian, and you would have seen him. Just Google his name, Drew Pavlo, and he was holding protests in his university, this past year for Hong Kong, for Uyghurs, for Tibetans, and it really shed light on what was happening to not just the Uyghurs but other groups within China. And I would do that and even just talking to your family, holding protests, even like one or two, three people. I mean, there are Jews, literally Jews in London holding protests, two, three people, or even there was a sole individual, I forget his name now, holding up a poster saying 3 million people, Muslims in concentration camps. These things all make a difference. Sharing, retweeting, talking about it, hashtagging, obviously boycotting. In a lot of our lives, the Chinese products do play a major role. So do your best. If you're buying 10 products a day, 10 products a week, cut it down to 9, cut it down to 8, do your bit. It will all make a difference.
Okay, and what do you feel the future will be for these Uyghur Muslims in China?
If the world does not take action, like real action, I mean, I mean, we've been condemning the Chinese for many, many years, and clearly they don't get the idea. We've been boycotting for a long time as well, and that hasn't really done anything. So unless we take actual real action, we will not see the Uyghurs as we know it. Now, right now, we believe that the Uyghurs are there physically, despite the many deaths that have happened, but we see physically a Uyghur, but inside they've become Hanafied or become atheists or become Chinese. And the Uyghurs, as we know it, will not exist unless real action is taken.
Oh, hold on, Arslan. I think we've come off live.
It still says live on my thing here.
That's what I'm seeing as well.
Shall we just keep going because you're recording it anyway?
Yeah.
And
okay.
post it after. Yeah.
Okay. So I asked what was going on. Can you tell us, maybe to get more personal, what are your links to the Uyghurs? I'm aware that you have family based there. You got married there as well, and I'm saying the differences of experience of when you were there and what is happening now, currently over there.
Yeah, so I'm ethnically Uyghur. My parents left East Turkestan in early 1980. I was born and raised in Australia. And I would go there every 3 or 4 years and spend a good half year each time since I was a child. I eventually married from there, so my wife's family is still there. My family, I've still got all my cousins, all my aunts and uncles still there, which I cannot contact. And many Uyghurs are in the same boat. They cannot contact their own loved ones, their own parents, their own brothers and sisters. Um, and so that's my connection there. And inshallah, if we do become free, I expect to go back and hopefully live there, and to uh, be a part of the independence movement. And yeah, that's my relationship with East Turkestan.
Okay, and is there any particular country you can point to that is making the most difference for the Uyghur Muslims right now? Any country that is, has
Yeah,
made.
as I mentioned, ironically, it's the United States. The United States is leading the way, regardless of what their agenda is. Um, it's the United States that's leading the way, and other countries really have to step up. And as I mentioned, there is a positive and a negative to the United States leading the way. The negative is people argue that, well, how genuine are the United States? And that's what you were pointing out before, because they've literally bombed the Middle East back into the Stone Age, some of these countries, and suddenly they're going to stick up for Muslims. But still, if it wasn't for the United States, we would literally have gas chambers, and and it would be the repetition of World War II again. So whilst the United States does have an agenda, we thank them so much, regardless. But we do need Muslims to step up, because it is a real shame to think. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ saw all these issues. We've got 50 odd Muslim countries, and then we got a country with no religious ties or ethnic ties to the Uyghurs, you know, stepping up for them, helping them out.
And can you say why exactly China is doing this?
Well, as I mentioned, that land is ours. The Uyghurs simply being there, living the Uyghur lifestyle, living the Islamic lifestyle, is a sign that, and even the name, as I mentioned, Xinjiang, the name, new land, new frontier. China has always said this land has always been ours. No, historically, this is not the case. And they've gone as far as saying the Uyghurs are not Turkic and that they are part Chinese. So they try and rewrite history. What they'll do is that they'll grab some coins, they'll grab some old clothing, Chinese clothing, they'll bury it deep in the lands of East Turkestan. They'll re-dig it up and go, look, that piece of clothing, that coin that we found is 5,000 years old. So this land has always belonged to the Chinese. And so they want to, even though they have been ruling East Turkestan for the past 70 years, they haven't actually had full control of it. And when you actually go there, you will actually say, this is not China.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Arslan. Is there anything else you would like to say or bring awareness to when it comes to the Uyghur Muslims?
Just don't buy into Chinese propaganda. Obviously, when we see Americans or the Western media, you know, normally normally, and you would have seen this even recently with Charlie Hebdo, you know, even though the Western media seems to be against, the Muslim narrative or against Muslims in the West, when it comes to China, even though the Western media is speaking out, it is actually the truth. And I'm one of the voices that say, you know what, um, I don't blindly, go and support, I don't go, hey, America, you're the best. I do say, you know what, America has it wrong here, or the Western media does have it wrong here. But when it comes to the Uyghurs, it is actually the truth. And so, even with me, you will see me not as, I mean, I've been on Western media, I've been interviewed, but you will not see me as frequent as other speakers because I do criticize the West. Because at the same time, you have to imagine, how did China come to this level? What happened in 1989? We saw the biggest massacre in Chinese history, and the West supported China and got them to this level of strength. So the West, especially the United States, is as much to blame for what's happening to the Uyghurs. But we really have no choice but to get the support and help from anyone, as long as it saves one Uyghur life. We're with them basically.
Okay. Thank you, Arslan. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. We hope to speak with you soon again. Um, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.